Darkfall Lost Souls is a first-person horror adventure game released in 2009 from Darkling Room. It is also the third installment in the Darkfall series. Just like its predecessor, Lost Souls was developed almost entirely by indie developer Jonathan Boakes. All three games revolve around a vague, unexplained supernatural manifestation called a Darkfall. This third title sees us returning to the Dowerton train station and hotel from Darkfall the Journal. Though Lost Souls did not receive the same amount of attention as the other Darkfall games, what reviews it did garner spoke very positively of it, with AdventureGamers.com awarding it Best First-Person PC Adventure in 2009. Not to directly state my feelings on this game up top, but certainly the most important thing to note in this series is the impressive nature of a trilogy of games being conceived from one man, with all the good and bad that accompanies that. Though they as a whole are not graphically or conceptually groundbreaking, there is a thrill I get out of playing a game that came unfiltered out of one mind, and seeing that vision accomplished, and invention thriving amidst limitation. I think The Journal is a fantastic little ghost story, though it was visually out of date even for 2002. The developer's clear passion for the project shone through and elevated a low-budget indie title into something really special. Its sequel is, I feel, a step in the wrong direction, though it retains some of the things I enjoyed about the original. The Journal feels like something that was marinating for a long time, and it came out naturally. Lights Out feels like a gamble, or a challenge to its developer, using the paranormal as a red herring, but ultimately being sci-fi at heart. But the most persistent issue concerning Lights Out is that it's just not nearly as genuine or creepy or atmospheric. The 5-year gap in between Lights Out and Lost Souls does see a dramatic turn in the style and atmosphere of Darkfall, though the mainstays of ghost hunting, derelict buildings, and old British charm are not far behind the new darker shade of paint. Most things are more interesting when they are made darker, like Batman, the later half of Gary Newman's discography. That's it. It wasn't my fault. I never... The third and likely final Darkfall game opens as our protagonist, known only as the Inspector, makes his way through the tunnel leading to what remains of the Dowerton hotel and train station. Almost immediately, we are fed a lot of the setup through periodicals found on the way to the station. We learn that 5 years earlier, the Inspector was working on a case involving a missing 11-year-old girl named Amy Haven. He was convinced that a notorious transient named Mr. Bones was responsible, but unable to pin anything to him, he resorted to planting evidence, which cost him his job, the respect of his neighbors, and presumably this child's life. Now 5 years later, he stumbles back to the last known trail, fueled by antipsychotics and a hot tip that some teenagers had Amy had been spotted in the area by some local teenagers. What teenagers would hang around in a place like this? I feel like I have tetanus just looking at this place. Is this what the teens are into? That's just asking for trouble. I wouldn't even have time for such foolishness, as I was too busy shopping for trench coats and listening to KMFDM. Upon entering this tunnel and the sort of sphere of creepiness that seems to surround the place, the Inspector starts to receive poorly formatted text messages from someone named Echo. Let's hope this guy doesn't want to leave the story early, causing everybody to rewrite his story arc. This is going to be a Lost joke, and only people that watch Lost would get it. Most of these messages are sort of accusatory and mean-spirited, urging the Inspector to accept the truth and his role in Amy's death, but a lot of them are also trying to push the Inspector in the right direction. To add to this, he is sort of unceremoniously introduced to the concept of ghosts. Yeah, ghosts start showing up, and for the most part, the Inspector doesn't really need to take a beat to absorb that. If I found out ghosts were real, I'd need like a week alone with my thoughts to ruminate on what that means to me, philosophically and spiritually. I probably would have cared more about showing up to those meetings. Oh shit, there are many restless spirits in Dowerton, and we get to learn a lot about a few of them. For some reason, the Inspector is able to commune with them across some kind of rift in time, or this dimension. In any case, the connecting thread between these ghosts is that they collectively killed themselves for various reasons inside the hotel, and now some force seems to be preventing them from moving on. The Inspector is at different points able to enter not just the memories, but the physical form of these people in the past, in order to accomplish some task that they were too incompetent to accomplish themselves. Whoa, can't believe I said that without stumbling. I have no idea why I wrote such a mean addendum to that. While this is going on, you run across Amy a couple of times, and although she couldn't be more stereotypically a ghost, the inspector doesn't seem to accept that for a while.
We must leave, Amy. I am seeing things. Terrible things.
She's transparent. She's see-through, my man. That's not good. People that are alive aren't see-through. My ex taught me that most of all. Only the dead are truly honest to me. No secrets. No lies. Amy has him take part in a series of childish games as some kind of punishment for his bungling of her rescue. Darkfall 3 in many ways takes the plot of the first game and dips it in a layer of grime and rust and really pushes it towards genuine horror instead of the light creepiness of the other two. This manifests to varying degrees of success, but the intent to creep you out is clear. The sequences where you work to help Dowerton's ghosts was the highlight of my playthrough, and they offer a small oasis of positivity in a relentlessly dark and muddled story. I think my biggest issue with this game's plot is that, unlike the other two games, Lost Souls has a somewhat understandable and fleshed out protagonist. The other games use their main characters as a placeholder for you, and the game's setting serves as the principal character. It's one of the most endearing and charming aspects of those games. The care put into making these places feel historic and unique. There is a noticeable lack of that in this one. While the Dowerton Hotel is certainly moody and has a very distinct aesthetic to it, it's lost a lot of the simple, grounded appeal it used to have. And there is what felt like, to me, a half-hearted attempt at giving the inspector a flimsy character arc. I feel like there is a conflict of ideas here because I know what kind of emotional state this character must be in. It's an interesting character, so naturally I want some kind of resolution to his pain. Whether that is achieved by his death, his recovery, a worsening of his anguish, it doesn't matter. I just want something. And once he learns the truth and the credits are rolling, I couldn't recognize anything that felt like a resolution. Like, something happened, but it didn't mean anything to me. I don't know how the inspector feels about all this. I don't know what this means for the character. And that's unfortunate. Maybe it's a result of so much of this game's conceit being left to interpretation, as in the game's namesake, which is mentioned maybe twice in the whole game. The game is named after something with properties and purposes we aren't told. So it's like something I don't really understand is working to bring about some revelation that didn't really seem necessary, which results in an open-ended conclusion. I really think we should be given at least one more piece of the story, just so it means a little more. I feel like the pieces are here, there's just a missing link I desperately want filled. If anything, I feel like the revelation should have been that it was the inspector's fault that the case was never solved, and in the final moments, he has to own up to it and work to free Amy's wandering spirit and try to forgive himself, or maybe he kills himself. Either way, it would make sense to me. But that card was played kind of right at the beginning, and I think that's unfortunate. It's kind of like in Dexter, when you think like the worst thing that could happen to Dexter is that they catch him and they figure out he's a serial killer, but they play that card in season 2. So you got like 6 other seasons where you're like, oh, well, they're not going to bring that up again, right? And guess what? They don't really. Though what I've mostly done is air grievances, what is portrayed really well is a frustrated, tired protagonist wandering a building that is teeming with emotion. It feels restless, and some of the ghost characters are really endearing. There's an astrologist afraid of facing his dying mother, a drunken theater actress that ruined her last chance at fame, as well as a pair of bank robbers that botched their last heist. It's an excellent pretext to tell multiple stories at once. I just wish a little more care was given to the main characters. That's sort of out of character. Oh. Lost Souls ditches the familiar slideshow style of navigation and uses a panoramic method similar to games like Scratches and Darkness Within. The difference is you still need to choose a direction to face, and this can almost always be the full range of motion, up, down, and left and right. Though certainly more pleasant to witness, it has its frustrations. For one thing, the inspector moves direction really slowly, and giving you a constant 4 directions you can look makes it easy to miss things by simply not thinking to look up at the ceiling or down at your feet all the time. It wouldn't be much of an issue if you just had free control of the camera. like the aforementioned scratches. It also becomes taxing when a lot of the game's challenges require you to frequently backtrack to areas you've already explored. A lot of these areas are needlessly obstructed by imperceptible debris, so walking down the main train tracks, which you'd imagine would be a straight shot down, instead has you turning in all manner of directions to wind your way to another area of the station. Speaking of challenges, there are much more this time around. Puzzles are plentiful and of varying degrees of difficulty. Some involve simply observing clues and applying them to a task. Some are trial and error, like picking locks. And some are games that Amy has you play, which, while not difficult, can lead to some of the more tense moments in the game. The most memorable of the puzzles has to be one that has you quickly trying to repair a TV set, while the flickering light reveals an approaching mannequin ghost in your peripheral. You can't really die, but you can be set back a bit and lose some of your progress. The stakes are marginal, but it was difficult not to feel anxious knowing this thing was inching closer to you. All in all, the gameplay is much more direct and linear. Unlike the Journal or Lights Out, you won't be worrying about several puzzles all at once, and it seems much more concerned about keeping you on edge and engaged, instead of slowly doling out a minimalist plot. It's probably the most accessible because of this. A lot of the difficulty doesn't arise from the puzzles conceptually, but the awkward navigation. Another thing that was particularly bothersome was that you frequently need scissors to complete puzzles, and you can get scissors from a few places because thankfully, whatever group of insane homeless that used to hang out here also had access to a Costco bulk order of hospital-grade scissors. The abundance of these scissors does not make up for the fact that they break so frequently, dozens and dozens of times, until you become so frustrated you just want to not express your frustration because you're an introverted, spineless loser that stuffs every indignity he suffers deep inside his frail shell. The base experience of Lost Souls is enjoyable, and there's some fun, exploration, and tension, but you absolutely will be stifled by puzzles and an absurd amount of backtracking. I see a lot of growth and development in this game, and it's mostly for the better, but there is still a lot that could have been ironed out. This developer's work reminds me of Pathologic. You know how that game practically centers around worrying about a series of bars for varying qualities? If you picture each of these bars as different aspects of game design, and with each game, you know what? I've stopped caring about this metaphor. Anyway, there are some things that are improved, but other issues are brought out as a result. Maybe I should have done a second draft on this part. Boy, this is rapidly becoming none of my business. If you've seen the other games in this series, then you can probably deduce that this game looks a lot fancier. From all-around better design and texturing to little visual tricks to add realism, like having the camera lightly sway when the inspector is stressed out, or seeing his breath in the cold air, there is a clear outpouring of style and detail in this game's environment. Every square inch of Dowerton is covered in graffiti, trash, doll parts, medical supplies, and other things that would most likely unsettle people. A lot of this game looks fantastic, but there are certainly parts that look a little rushed and thrown together. The new, cleanly rendered visuals clash much harder when mixed with lower quality assets that you'd more commonly see in a hidden object puzzle game. Oh god, I'm putting these rotting dolls into little coffins and putting glass eyes into the... This is still not out of the norm for a Darkling Room game, however, and if you were fine with it before, you'll probably still be fine with it. There are definitely moments in this game that are effectively creepy and rooms that you desperately want to get out of. When the game's visuals and atmospheric sound design mesh, you can feel it, and it feels great. There are a ton of great ambient noises and voices and music, and a lot of it harkens back to the Journal, only a little more grimy and malevolent. How many times have I said grimy? Has it been a lot? Dowerton very much feels like a threatening and unsafe place this time around. I can see a lot of visual similarities to the bafflingly abandoned Condemned series. Another series that really liked doing spooky things with mannequins and wall scribbles. Also like that series, Lost Souls seems to exist in a strange, hyper-realistic world where you're unsure about what's real and what's being projected by the protagonist. I also had pretty much the same reaction to both of these games ending. I was just like, anyway, yeah, it looks really cool sometimes, and sometimes it looks a little goofy when it goes overboard with spooky accoutrement. A reoccurring complaint I seem to have about these games is the fact that Jonathan Boakes insists on doing the lion's share of the voice acting, and this game is no exception, although he at least had the decency to pitch his voice down a few notches. So now instead of sounding like Jonathan Boakes, it sounds like Jonathan Boakes with his voice pitched down a few notches.
Is it you, Bones? Are you still hiding here?
I'm not into it. Other than that, the audio is on point, and there are a few other voice actors to break up all the J-man. The caveat I usually apply to an indie adventure game's audio visuals is that if you're accustomed to the low-budget, stuck-in-time look of them, you'll probably not be deterred by this, especially in this case because this game does look great and sound great for the most part.
Have you seen Amy?
Amy?
She's missing. I'm looking for her.
And this is a child?
It's all my fault, you see. It's my fault.
I'm sorry, I don't have any money. I'm not interested. Sorry, bye. Darkfall Lost Souls is a nice little gem of a game, but it's got its flaws for sure. It also doesn't help that it is a sequel to a much more effective ghost story. This one spends its time pacing around a mystery and the facsimile of a main character without doing anything noteworthy with either. But what it does do successfully, as usual, is Dowerton. The revamped visuals and sound design make the old train station a deeply unpleasant and creepy place. The inventive spark of the journal is still there, but it shows itself in a much different way. I don't know if this is the maturing of Boakes as a game designer, but it sure feels like a step back as a writer. This is through and through a horror experience, but it made it all the more clear that what I appreciate about the previous game was its reliance on atmosphere, charming locations, and comprehensive history. I didn't write anything else, so I'm sorry, that's the end. If I can just, come up with something else to say about it. I think if you're gonna play it the first time around, it might hold your interest. It might be very interesting. But it doesn't really lend itself to repeat playthroughs. This is probably my third playthrough. I did 2 on my own, and I felt pretty satisfied with replaying them after that. And I did the third one to do this video. So I think I've gotten all I can out of Darkfall Lost Souls. It's pretty good. I just probably have a stupid attachment to the first one, and I feel like that one's better. It's more charming, it's got more history. This one's like trying really hard to be edgy, and I'm not too into it. Anyway, thanks for watching. I don't know if you probably don't know because I did nothing to advertise it, but I started a second channel with this woman that I locked up. I started a second channel with this person I've enslaved. You should go. It's a little. You should go check it out, but it's a little different. The main conceit of it is that it's a podcast about just obscure Disney stuff. We're both big Disney fans, but there's a lot of like weird little offshoot things that don't get a whole lot of attention. We wanted to shine a light on some of that stuff and some of the peripheral Disney things like news and trivia stuff. We've done one. As of me recording this, we've done one, and I've put it up. It's called Have a Mice Life. That's mice, not nice. Have a Nice Life is one of my favorite bands in the whole world. So it's not that, it's mice. Have a Mice Life. Mice because Mickey Mouse is a mouse, and many mice are mice. It's a stretch to get there, but when you get there, you might have a light chuckle. So also what I'm going to be doing with that channel is we're going to be doing some Let's Play stuff that I was too unentertaining to do on my own, and I find it a lot more interesting when I have somebody to do it with. Oh, I can already double jump.
Oh, beautiful. This is a piss baby game.
Piss baby? Is that an established term?
Little piss babies can play.
Yeah, so look for stuff. We've already recorded like a shitload of stuff. Look for stuff on that channel. I think we played Epic Mickey, and we'll do other non-Disney games just because we want to play games. We did some CRT race, cathode ray tube racing, CTR racing. The one with what's his name? Wacko the Jacko Rabbit. Crash Bandicoot. Anyway, yeah, I'm done talking. This is ridiculous. Thank you for watching this, and I'm sorry it took so long to get a video out. I was busy doing other stuff. I got other shit to deal with. Fuck! I love you though. Please keep watching me. Please support me on Patreon. I really fucking need it. Thank you. Bye.